Everybody, welcome to the first SDMX IO webinar for 2024, Introduction to the SDMX Dashboard Generator. This is a very exciting project that was co-winner of the SDMX Hackathon last year, as announced in the Global Conference. Happy that all of you could join us, and without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to the team, Christina, Olivier, and Pietro. Thank you.
Many thanks, Brian. I hope you can hear me well, and many thanks to all of you that joined us this morning for this exciting project, the SDMX Dashboard Generator. Yeah, let me just introduce, very briefly to you the team. So Christina, she's working as a financial market analyst in the monetary economic department. She's an expert in data visualization as well. Pietro, he's joining us from Hong Kong. He's also a financial market analyst there, and very expert into development, I must say. Stefan is not joining us today, but he has been a great contribution to the project, and he's a IT developer. And then myself, I'm a statistician at the Monetary Economy Department of the BIS. The purpose of this presentation is, of course, to present you the SDMX Dashboard Generator, what it does, how it does it, and what's the overall purpose. So just a very brief introduction on the Dashboard Generator. It's a open source application entirely developed in Python. It's freely available on GitHub, and it allows you to create dashboards from SDMX endpoints. Now, the question is why, and why did we develop this application? Well, actually, the project started with the SDMX Global Conference, the Global Conference in Bahrain in 2023. In that context, there was the first SDMX Global Hackathon. And this is why we wanted to, deliver one of the applications that were asked. It was to create a dashboard generator from SDMX endpoints and APIs. So in that context, we wanted to take this challenge, and we were very humbled actually to be co-winner of this context. Now the goal was also to do something more. And this something more was actually to really open source this application to the wider public, and to allow SDMX also to be used for data visualization. As probably many of you know and are familiar with SDMX, SDMX is a beautiful standard to exchange data and metadata, but it's also quite difficult for the wider public opinion, let's say, to use it. And the reason is quite obvious, it's complicated. So the challenge is, how do we try to simplify and lower those fixed costs to enter the SDMX logic? And one of the answer is actually to deliver tools, deliver ready to go solutions and open source them. And this is what we tried as well to do, along with other colleagues. I see many of those already in the call, and I thank you for the participation, but we try to do that with SDMX.io, which is this platform hosting, solution, open source solution on SDMX and more. So without further introduction there, I think we can jump straight into the presentation of today webinar on the SDMX Dashboard Generator. So maybe I can invite you, Pietro, to start sharing your screen. So the outline is quite straightforward. We'll first walk you through the solution, the app, with the documentation, show you where to get it with the GitHub repo. We will have a second part of the webinar mostly focused on how do you build your dashboard, what are the technicalities behind the scenes, and how can you actually deploy it in your organization or on your PC. Yeah, so feel free really to post also your question into the chat. I will keep an eye on that, and also feel free to jump into the webinar, into the discussion if you have any question, pressing needs to ask us question. Thank you very much, and over to you, Pietro.
Thank you, Olivier, and good morning, everyone. So you can see here in my screen, hopefully, a ready-made dashboard. This is one of the examples that we share on GitHub. Christina will later walk you through the elements of the dashboard, but now you have an idea of what we are building towards. So the exact way this can be deployed in a server so it's accessible to users in your organization or outside, that depends on your infrastructure. But what we're going to see now is how to deploy it locally, so on your own machine, and how you can essentially play around with the YAML file and dashboards for later deployment. So hopefully you have seen or you have access to the GitHub repo. So this is it. It is available publicly. And here you find a quick README and most importantly, the link to our documentation. So the documentation is quite comprehensive, if I say so myself, but most importantly here we have our getting started page. So getting started, and we're gonna go through this from scratch essentially. What we do first is we get our repo. So here I've simply straight up VS Code, and I already have a Python environment because that takes a bit of time. So I am cloning our repo directly there and continue following in the documentation. So here we do recommend you use a virtual environment manager. There are many ways to do this in Python. Those of you who are more familiar probably have a preferred method. Here you have one example, and as I said, I have already set it up because this takes a little bit of time to install the packages. We are showing here how to set up the environment and here how to install the packages. We have the requirements specified as usual for Python projects in a requirements file, but we also have development requirements if you actually end up working on the infrastructure itself, the dashboard, and trying to make changes beyond the YAML file. So now we have our dashboard here, and we simply start Python by calling the app file. So and I forgot one line, apologies. Now what you're going to see is this beautiful warning. So this is for testing, and you will see the address. This is local host address, so you'll see where the dashboard is actually running. And if we go here, let's go to the base address. You'll find the dashboard without any YAML file loaded. So you see this drag and drop box. The alternative way to dragging and dropping a YAML file here is to specify here a path, and let's do a simple example, the one you were seeing before. So now it's loading, and while it's loading, you see here what it's actually doing. So it's collecting the data. It's trying to collect metadata using a DSD link. That one is not actually given in the YAML file, so it's falling back onto the other method, and it's slowly returning the data. One last thing I will make note of is that it is doing this collection asynchronously. So while it is not incredibly fast due to Eurostat's API, it is doing it as fast as possible for each graph. And now we have our beautiful dashboard loaded, and I will pass on to Christina, who will walk you through it.
Good morning, everyone, also from my side. Thanks, Olivier and Pietro, for the nice introduction. So before going through each of the elements of the dashboard, I would just like to highlight a bit the picture, some elements from the big picture. So we have this app, which is integrated with SDMX, supporting the 2.1 version, as we said before, and it just connects to the data, it pulls the data, it interprets then a YAML file that we will go through it in a second. And then it will leverage also a Python class, which will interpret all these elements in the YAML file, and we will finally render the dashboard. Now, a few more elements that I would like to highlight. We just leverage open source code, so all the open source packages. application has also flexible design, which means depending on which elements we specify in the YAML file, then the code automatically will interpret all of those and will render them in the final dashboard. Then we also we worked on the how to improve the performance of the dashboard itself. Maybe my colleagues will explain better in details how we managed to achieve this, because we spent quite some time on these elements as well. And okay, before let's see all these elements in the dashboard itself. So the dashboard, the elements of the dashboard, we start in the top part with a navigation bar, which will always appear in every dashboard. And here there are two elements that I would like to stress, to point you to. We have the info button, which contains, if we click on it, which contains the metadata from the SDMX. So we don't, we could manually adjust the YAML file, but otherwise this is envisaged to read automatically whatever is available in the and supported by SDMX. Not only that, we see also toggle with the language close to the info button. Maybe we can click on it and we can see that we can switch from one language to another. So now it's English. We could click, for example, to French, just to see what happens. And we see that very quickly the dashboard is translated into another language. We are not using Google Translator. This is all supported by SDMX whenever the institution supports this language switch. And we are leveraging this automatically in our dashboard. Now, the dashboard itself, we have a title and subtitle. This, again, is whenever supported by the metadata of the SDMX, we retrieve this automatically as well. And then the way you can see at this dashboard is that there are different cards over it, reflecting different elements. So, for example, we can distinguish between KPIs, pie bars, pie charts, bar charts, and below line charts as well. Now, going up again, just to see individually, for example, a card related to the KPIs. Here we can also see that each card is composed again with like a title, a subtitle, an info button that if we click on, again, we leverage this metadata whenever available and supported by the SDMX. Then we also have the data grid. So we can see maybe here, but also below, because it will have more data points. Yes, so we could also visualize very quickly the data supported, retrieved by each of the graphs. And we could also, on the left side, in this case, we could see the unit, the source of the URL, and we could potentially also download the data in case we need to do something else outside the application. One interesting and nice feature that we wanted to highlight also at this stage is that let's imagine we want to get the data, but we also want to further filter this data. We could exclude some of the elements. For example, we could exclude the first element from the list, and then it will adjust automatically. And we could get that the data. And eventually we could also put it back in case we want to, it was a mistake, for example. All the graphs are leveraging Plotly, open source library. So everything you expect to do with Plotly, then you could do it also here. So you could select elements you could hover over, then you could zoom into, and yes, that's pretty much it. This is for the pie. The same we have for the bars, and also quite similarly also to the line charts. Behind the dashboard, there is a Python class, and with some functions, the wrappers, and they will automatically interpret the YAML file that I guess we will see in a second how it's structured, and also how we could change some of the elements. For example, should we go now to see, or would you like to add something? I don't know, Pietro, Olivier.
Maybe a few things, Christina, on the dashboard itself. So if you go a little bit up, Pietro, yeah, just to show, you have a title there, the big title, macroeconomic indicators in the UR area, and a subtitle. So you notice that when Pietro changed the language to French or to German, actually this title stays the same. And the reason is quite simple. We did that by default, by design. This is really the let's say the person in charge of creating the dashboard that is defining this title. And it comes with the YAML file that Christina will show you in a couple of seconds. So yeah, and maybe I just want also to show you if you switch to German, for instance, Pietro, could you just yeah, for instance, and then you click on the I button or whatever kind of, yeah, this one maybe. As you can see, this is actually the description that comes from the data flow. We could potentially also add other kind of, metadata there. But this is translating across the whole dashboard. So the description, the data flow, it is also changing the units description. So if you go a little bit down, scroll a little bit down, Pietro, just to show you, as you can see, the legend keys also have been translated, the names of the countries, so on and so forth. So that's really something which is incredibly flexible and which comes embedded into the SDMX logic as well, because after all, these are metadata. Yeah. Back to you again, Christine or Pietro.
Thank you, Olivier. So just one quick comment before we move on to the YAML file, and I think this also answers a question I saw appearing. So this, first of all, is all live, as in if you refresh the dashboard, changing the language doesn't do that, but if you refresh the dashboard, you retrieve the data once again, and this is all done through SDMX APIs. So it is not possible to connect to a local database. The visualization infrastructure of the dashboard could potentially be adapted to do that, but that would require changing the data retrieval part. And of course, there is an issue of storing the data versus retrieving it every time the dashboard is loaded. And I think the other questions, Olivier, you're keeping an eye on those, and some of them, I guess, will be answered by going through the YAML file. So back to you, Christina and Olivier.
Yeah, maybe we can go quickly to the documentation. I don't know if this is in your outline, Christina, or otherwise I would suggest we keep an eye there. And I can maybe start and then feel free to jump in, Christina. So one of the key questions, of course, when you come up with this solution, especially when you open source it, is really to provide as much as information you can to the user and try to go really deep down as well into the technicalities so that you can reuse this application. And so this is why from the GitHub repo, we have a direct link as well to the documentation. So documentation has been built with Sphinx to be really aligned also with the code. We'll show you the modules as well. So this is basically, the landing page of the documentation, which explain you a little bit the rationale, but you can see on the left-hand side or even bottom to the of the page, you have, a menu, quite nice menu there, which helps you to walk through the main features and the high-level architecture of the application. You also have a getting started section just to help you, and this Pietro already show you, but to help you getting started with the app, how to install it, how do I deploy it, how do I upload the YAML file, and I guess this is also maybe answering some of the questions from Yarnor I saw in the chat. You do have release notes, but most importantly, you have technical specification. So in the technical specification section, I'll go very quickly because maybe Christina and Pietro will then deep down there, but you do have, each single methods or class or function that we have in the file. We really try to be very precise there and try to give as much content as you want. First, because it helps you to understand the code and potentially adapt it to your needs. But second, of course, feel free to fork the repo and then build on top, customize it. We do have for that, in the help, also the contributing section. Just bear in mind that this application comes with a Apache 2.0 license, so that's really open. And we also provide, let's say, a pull request templates. If you want really also to contribute to the repo, you're very welcome to do so. But maybe I go back to you, Christina, and we can show a little bit more the walkthrough and the different features if you like. Thanks.
Yes, more than the features, what I wanted to focus on right now was the YAML file, just to stay connected with the dashboard a bit. Also to answer the question, where do we specify how to get the data, which is actually in the YAML file, so the specification file. Yeah, so here what we see is a bunch of elements that then are later interpreted in the functions that we mentioned in the application itself. And the way you should look at this YAML file is nothing else like a list of ingredients that the application will interpret. So you will see, I said before, in the dashboard there are different cards, and each card, for example, corresponds to a KPI rather than a bar chart, a pie chart, and something else. And you will see here that each block corresponds to exactly those charts. So for example, it starts when it's written row 1. We have, in this case, 3 elements corresponding to row 1. And the way the application interprets it is that for the first row, it will take into account, could you please zoom in a bit? Great. So the way the application interprets these elements is that for the first row, it will know that it has to have 3 cards. And the application will automatically split the space into 3 cards. Now, for row 1, chart type value, it means that it's a KPI. Now, you will see that there are some elements here which maybe are not straightforward to understand. So for example, why just row 1 and not row 1 position 1, or why chart type value? These elements are coming directly as hard requirements that we had to develop for the hackathon itself, so that we had to stick with these instructions. Title, subtitle, we see here subtitle. When we have auto, it's automatically pulled whenever supported directly from the SDMX metadata. Otherwise, we could specify something else. For example, if we specify, maybe Pietro, we can try.
Let's perhaps show the dashboard as it is now, since it's not the one loaded. So we can show the alternatives. I'm just dragging the YAML file to here, and it will load what we were seeing. There we go.
Okay, fantastic. So the card we're looking now is the first one on the top left corner. So you see we have a title, subtitle. Just keep in mind the elements. We have a bootstrap icon, and we will see how easy it is to change that one as well, because it comes from a website. It's nothing, we are not pulling the icons, and we don't manually update them, but there is a website, a nice website that we reference to, and then we just specify the reference, and it will be automatically reflected here. And I want you to notice that here there are 2 decimals, and in a second we'll see how this will change as well. We go back to the YAML file maybe. So for example, if we specify, I don't know, subtitle, this is a test, just to see that this works. Yeah. Maybe let's modify, I don't know, unit icon. Instead of PB basket field, we specify balloon heart field. Yeah. Decimals instead of 2, maybe 1 or 0, as you prefer, Pietro. And we can just give it a try now. Yeah, so you see the icon changed, the decimals changed, and also the subtitle changed as well. So whenever it's supported, it will be automatically retrieved. Otherwise, we could easily specify all the other elements there, and then they will be reflected. One more thing that I wanted to show, if we remove completely the block, then I said that the application will automatically understand that that space is devoted to as many elements as specified for that row. So if we remove the block in the YAML, then this space should be divided into 2 rather than in 3. This closed. And yes, here we are. This will be automatically reflected. So it doesn't matter where you specify the block, whether before, after, it doesn't matter which one it comes, then the application will assign the space to the card and the settings that you specified in it. Now, YAML file data part, maybe I hand over this to Olivier, just to explain a bit the difference between the link, the metadata, and the data itself, because this is related to the question we got.
Thanks, Christina. Indeed, I mean, the most important part is, of course, where do I get the data and the metadata, and that's where SDMX shows the full power of the standard. So as you can see, actually, we have 3 points here. We have the DSD link, we have the metadata link, and we have the data link. And for you who are very expert there, and I saw that many of you are already expert there, the basic difference is that the DSD link is linking to the data structure of the data flow. The metadata link is linking to the data flow structure, the data flow, and then the data is, of course, a data query. So one point is that what do we need at all to have the data? Well, of course, to feature it into the dashboard, and the data has to come. The data query has to come in a way so that if you want to have a pie chart, then you need to select the dimension you want to actually show in the legend keys. The same thing is for the KPI. Probably you just want to have one data point and not 2 data points. So this is kind of, the way we frame the application. Some of you may rightly so say, well, that's a limitation. Yes, because, the handling of the SDMX part is on you. It's not on the application itself. The application just visualize what the SDMX query you're doing is there. So this is why if you look at line 32 with the data, you'll see that here we're getting from the ILO from a data flow on SDG, you have one observation which correspond to the period 2023, and that's the last observation equal 1, right? So you just want to have one observation, not 2 observations there. The metadata link is really important because that's where part of the metadata comes from, especially the data flow one. So this is where actually you need to provide it. And the DSD link is also super important. That's where actually we combine the code list, and code list there values are really important also to translate them if the translation is available, to show them in the legend keys, so on and so forth. So all this harmony between DSD and data flow and data themselves are really all there. Yeah, and of course, the different dimensional measures or time measures that you have in your DSD, they have to also be provided in the YAML file. So if you see the first example that Christina showed you, you have the x-axis concept, which refers to time period. So you have the legend concept, which is basically a dimension. In this case, it's very simple. It's a reference area. And then, of course, you have with the y-axis, which refers to the measure, the ops value. Just, a minor thing here, we just support SDMX 2.1. We don't support SDMX 3.0. And also we support currently the version 1 of API, not yet the version 2.0. The reason is quite simple, is that one of the packages we use also to parse SDMX file is SDMX Stone, which currently support, version 1 of the API, but there could be project also to expand this and support more than the version 1 of the API. Yeah. Do we want to go back to documentation now, Christina, or is there still some demo that you want to run?
Not demo, but since I anticipated before how we optimize our application, maybe we could spend a few words on that. So I think we leverage two aspects to optimize the application there. We use the asynchronous retrieval. Maybe Pietro can spend a few words on that. And also the caching methodology, because this also helps to improve the performance, right, Olivia? So maybe we could say a few more on this.
Yeah, definitely. I think, two things, and then I'll hand over to Pietro. When you retrieve a lot of data, metadata, of course, it's quite expensive in terms of retrieval. And the reason is that sometimes from our query, we need to pass all the descendants. And for some providers, let's say Eurostat, when you query against the older descendants in your data flow, it means really big files. So we wanted really to run this asynchronously in order to smooth and facilitate, the loading of the data, the dashboard, to visualize quite quickly. So this is why, one component of the, let's say, the engine of this dashboard is ready to do asynchronous request. The second component, and I see also one question from Christian, actually commenting, a very good comment from Christian in the chat, is that actually the dashboard loads not bit by bit, but in a single bit. What I mean is that to display the dashboard, you need to load everything, right? From the first KPI to the very end. And the reason is quite simple, is that the dashboard has to be sufficiently smart to allocate the space depending on what has been loaded or not. So there is a reason why we print everything into a single div and not multiple divs. So there is a big container, which is the whole dashboard. And then within this big container, there are different containers which correspond to the graph and so on and so forth. Of course, if the loading fails, then we have backups or raising exceptions, which allows us to pause there and just to display an error in the location where the graph actually failed. So there is, behind the scene also exception handlings, which prevents you to do so. But that's the overall logic there. Pietro, do you want to say a little bit more about the asynchronous and also the caching methods that we use in order to improve performance?
Let's quickly show what happens if, say, we have the wrong link. Let's say we misspelled ILO here, and we try to reload. So in the background, and this was too fast for me to describe it, but so first of all, it tried to collect the data, it failed, and it still showed whatever it did manage to collect. And we have this error message instead of the KPI where we change the link. The asynchronicity of the dashboard simply means that, yes, while we are waiting to at least try to collect everything before showing it, we are not sequentially collecting the data and running sequential API calls. What we are doing is we have a data and a metadata query, and we are triggering all the data query at the same time. And when each graph's data is done, whenever they are ready, we query the metadata. And this, all of the graphs run separately, and this essentially means that the overall load time for a dashboard is more or less determined by the slowest data and the slowest metadata collection. So here you can also see what happened, and the debug messages are all going to be in your session if you're doing the testing. And back to you, Olivia, I think.
Or to me.
Or to you, Christina, yes. I apologize.
I just want to stress maybe 2 points. First of all, that our application is really flexible. It welcomes, as we said, a bunch of different ingredients, and they are automatically translated into a final layout. It doesn't matter where the data comes from. We just specify the link, and it doesn't matter which element, which graph we want to show, then it will be automatically interpreted as well. Of course, there is a lot of space to further improving this work. we could specify further, I don't know, how to aggregate the data, or we could implement everything which is supported by Plotly and potentially in the Pandas data frame, because we are leveraging the Pandas data frame here in our application. But yes, it's really flexible, and it's really open to a lot of improvements for the future. And just with the second element I wanted to stress is what Stefan worked on mainly, which is the security components of our application. Our application is also very secure, and we also have a lot of unit tests, or we have different IT tests in place just to track and to make sure that our application really works well. And yes, it's that's it. And
yeah, maybe I would suggest also, Pietro, if we can go back to the documentation and just have a quick look to the walkthrough, just to give you also a taste of the different features that we have. It's really important, behind the performance, the flexible design, and also the interactivity of the dashboard, to have it modular, meaning that you can really, design it and change the pieces of the engine without breaking the whole engine. That's the way we really frame the approach in terms of development. And this is why actually, the dashboard has three major components. One is, of course, the Dash. Dash, it's, an open source framework to build dashboards in Python. That's really, I would say, the core engine there that you cannot change indeed. But then on top of this, we built the different modules, and we have three of those. One is the SDMX, it's parsing, but also allowing you to, let's say, read the metadata, should I call them attributes sometime. But generally, that's a little bit what we have to say, and which is relying on the SDMX ton library mostly. The second part is the chart generator. We do have a module just specifically to build those charts. So, we offer a KPI, we offer bar, even pie or multiple lines or single line charts. But if you want to show even more fancy charts, you can do that. You have a dedicated model where you can plug in your code. And finally, of course, there is the specification file. So the specification files really comes from, let's say, the SDMX Hackathon terms of reference. In that context, there was really a specific requirement to meet specific needs into the YAML file, and very smartly so. So we didn't really change there. But the YAML file actually provides way more things, because it's also validating the settings that you have. It can't validate the URL. So as Pietro was showing you live just a couple of seconds ago, if you missed or misspelled the URL, then it shows you an error right into the dashboard. But if you, let's say, you have a settings which is incorrect, let's say you just don't put the query, the data URL for querying your data, or just hard coded errors, then it will tell you straight away. So this is also a validation steps to ensure that you're doing things properly. So all these different modules, of course, you can change them, especially the YAML file, and possibly you could even, augment them, design an interface just to, let's say, instead of writing into the YAML file, you could also have drop-down list, or even, just an interface where you could select your data sets, so on and so forth, depending on the endpoint. So the idea is really to be very modular, and to do it very flexibly. And just to mention a few things there, because there is another component linked to, let's say, modularity, is how do I deploy this into my organization, right? So I can just briefly mention how we do that at the BIS, which is very specific to our organization, but I guess could also be replicated in other organizations. Is we have OpenShift cluster, so you just build your Docker image and you plug this into your OpenShift cluster, and we can access this application from an internal URL. So Or if you can't do that, then you can run it locally. But of course, the problem of running locally is that if you have colleagues, on the other side of your desks, they can't access what you see. So that's a little bit the tricky thing. It really depends on your organization. This is why we're not pushing that much in terms of deployment. After all, the deploying of Dash apps is, very specific to Dash and very specific to your organization. But just bear in mind that you can do that. And if you like this application, you could definitely deploy it as a URL into your organization as we did. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much all that I wanted to say.
There are
I don't
some
know,
questions.
Christina.
There are some questions in the.
Yeah, maybe you can take those, yeah. And feel free also
think
to raise your hands if you want to, directly jump into the call and express your comments, question, doubts, or even critiques. Very happy to hear them.
So yes, the question from David, I think it's related again to the YAML file, how we specify the data versus metadata, whether we are leveraging a metadata database ad hoc. Maybe we could specify again how the application works with the data and the metadata, and that would be for you.
Yeah, so actually it's quite simple, David, there. What we do is, we get the description of the data flow, the name of the data flow, and, the annotation which are on it. So this is pretty much quite straightforward what we do. We're not leveraging actually a metadata set there. If I'm not getting wrong your question, but I wouldn't say so. Yeah, it's very, very straightforward. Of course, you could do more, but this is what we do. And maybe we can have also a look into the code for those of you interested there to see a little bit, the mechanics behind.
And
I hope it answers your question, David.
And the second question comes from Cedric, and it's again related to how we load the data, how we retrieve the data, and it's about this asynchronous and also the caching methodology. Maybe we could rephrase again, because the data is not coming in sequence, is not loading independently, but we worked on the performance of the data retrieval again.
So very quickly on the data retrieval, and here I'm just showing the exact log of what it's doing. So it is launching almost simultaneously. You don't see them, you don't see a timestamp here, but these are happening before anything is returned. So it's launching queries for the data, and as the data is returned for a single graph, it queries for the metadata. So as you can see, the order in which the data is queried is sequential because these are all triggered immediately, whereas the order for the metadata queries depends on whichever return data first. And then finally, once we have both data and metadata for a graph, we are ready and we wait for all of them to be done before showing the content.
And there is another question from Cedric. Can we combine a single graph data coming from two data flows? I think this is what we had in mind at the beginning. For example, this would be very useful, especially in those cases where you have like data in local currency. You want, for example, to convert to in a single currency. That would be a very easy use case. But of course, you could also combine different indicators across different institutions. So we tried to do that. I guess we had some tests, but it's not as easy as someone could imagine, in a sense that, yes, of course, potentially we could integrate this very easily. It would work in the same way as we've seen before. So we could specify this in the YAML file. We could further enlarge our functions to include these elements. Now, SDMX is not 100% easy in the sense that you would need to have the same concepts across all the institutions. So that would be a challenge. But yeah, to answer your questions, yes, we tried. Yes, it's easy to some extent, but it comes also with some challenges that we need to think about.
Yeah, that's definitely a very important question that you're raising. So I think ideally you could even perform calculation. Let's say you want to sum two different numbers and coming from two separate queries, but this really requires way more development there. So we're really constrained in terms of scope for now. But again, if you have any idea to contribute there, it would be very, very welcome to do that. Yeah, that would be a next step. I see also a question from David. No, many thanks for your question, actually, David. A really interesting one. Which formats are supported? SDMX CSV, SDMX ML, SDMX JSON. We do support SDMX ML, but of course, we could also support CSV and JSON. So this really depends in the way we implement there is a specific method that we have in a class, which is the SDMX parser, where we could easily plug in also the CSV and JSON there. But currently we are on the SDMX ML 2.1. And maybe we could show this, Pietro, into the documentation, just to walk through into the codes. If you go into the technical specification, as you can see, we have a specific class on SDMX helpers, and you see it's quite straightforward for the SDMX data. We have basically two methods there into the get data. Yeah, that one, for instance, I believe we only have, well, we can't see it here, but if you just open the source, yeah, the async one, yeah, I think we're getting just, yeah, there we get just getting SDMX ML, I guess. But to get the CSV could be quite straightforward there, so won't be a big change. Yeah, so we can consider to raise a pull request there. Yeah, so many thanks for the question. I'm looking whether there are any raised question or raised ends or other questions. Feel really free to ask. No. Okay. Good. Christina, Pietro, do you want to add something more, or is this?
I would just remind one more that we have all the code in the GitHub repo, and pull requests, additional features are more than welcome.
Yes, I think we showed and covered the main elements and features. We also shared our details, the documentation. Everyone is also very welcome to reach us bilaterally in case they will have follow-up questions. So.
And of course, the app is also on SDMX.io. So maybe we can show this, Pietro. Yeah, we have there into the tools. If you go into the tools, just on the top menu there, we do have the SDMX Dashboard Generator, which is coming. Some also other tools. Yeah, so if you click there, it's just on the right hand side. Yeah, the menu. Just yeah, there you go. And so you have a quite quick description there, and you can also learn more about the SDMX DG by clicking on the orange button there. And we try to show you also with some infographics how it works. So this is the high level, let's say, description. If you scroll down a bit, Pietro, yeah. And then if you go down, you also have, the different features that we support there. So feel free really to go to sdmx.io and have a look. And of course, you will be also redirected to the GitHub to download it. Yeah. Okay. So we still have two questions, maybe. Well, one, yes. So for Wojciech, sorry if it's not your pronunciation. Apologies in advance. So the first question is, do you plan to implement, thanks. Do you plan to implement observer pattern to join puzzles? And when you over dashboard and the other one can show tooltip of update. So for your first question, no, we don't. For your second question, well, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe Christina or Pietro, do you see there?
I think
something
Pietro
to know?
just showed if the question was related to the time period, whether this is reflected when hovering over, then the answer is yes. And we could add as many elements as supported within the dashboard. So whatever you want to flag there, you could add these elements as, yes, if you want to display them. And then when you hover over, you will see them.
And this is Plotly, but
Yeah.
again, you can customize them into the, as part of the modularity and flexibility of the app. If you want to use your, let's say, internal plotter in Python, you can do it. Okay, so we have another question. Is there any productive version of the SDMX Dashboard Generator on the website of an organization? So I guess you're really, mentioning whether we use this into production or not. Well, we have the example of the BIS, but we're running this internally in an OpenShift cluster. So yeah, we do deploy it already internally. Yeah. And just to close, and if there are no other questions, I will hand over to Brian to close the webinar. But just, this dashboard generator is also part of the awesome official statistics software GitHub repository. So many of you maybe already know, but just to mention there, we can find a lot of useful software for official statistics. Okay, many thanks. And if there are no other questions, I see still maybe a few questions. No, it's not a question. Okay, I hand over to you, Brian. Thanks.
Thanks, Olivier. Thanks, Christina, Pietro. A very excellent presentation this morning. And thanks everybody for participating. The webinar, as mentioned earlier in the comments, will be made available as a video link later this week. And this is, as also mentioned, the first SDMX IO webinar for the year. The next one will be scheduled in June. It's a Jingato, a machine learning library focused on economics and finance use cases. So stay tuned for that as well. Thanks again, everybody, and have a great day.